Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible were hoping that there would be a big bump from Top Gun Maverick. However, that seems to have not occurred. Instead, Barbie and Oppenheimer, even Sound of Freedom, have taken out the win from the sales of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. And does that forebode poorly for Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 2? Well, we're going to find out, and we're going to talk to somebody who saw this coming, even as all of the rest of us did not. All right, folks, welcome back to another beautiful day here on the WDW Pro channel. It is a joy each and every time that you elect to join us. We appreciate that you give us your time, and we intend to use it well. Whether you're at the gym, whether you're driving your kids to their next big soccer game, whatever you're doing out there, folks, we appreciate you, and we enjoy having you. Now, somebody we also enjoy having is Tom Connors of Midnight's Edge. Tom, welcome back to the channel again.
Hello, and thanks for having me.
Well, happy as always to have you, and we're going to pick your brain a little bit because you were quite the genius when it came to Mission Impossible and how it was going to do this summer. You were also correct on the Barbie movie. I got half of those. Although, in all fairness, we don't quite yet know what's going to happen with Mission Impossible, but it doesn't look good. Right. So, folks, as we get into this conversation, if you like content like it, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and that bell, that cute little bell. Click it and stick it to the algorithms. All right, here we've got out of the Hollywood Reporter by Pamela McClintock. And as we always say when we read an article by Pam, we love Pam. Mission Impossible box office, can Dead Reckoning rebound from Barbenheimer? The seventh installment of the Tom Cruise action franchise tumbled, I tell you. The series' worst 64% as Barbie and Oppenheimer turned into weapons of mass destruction. Tom Cruise, the star who is credited with saving the box office after Top Gun Maverick flew to $1.5 billion in global ticket sales, that's what Spielberg said, is now facing another kind of reckoning, surviving the Barbenheimer effect. His Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 tumbled a franchise worst, 64% to $19.5 million in its second weekend, when going up against Barbie and Oppenheimer, whose dual arrivals transformed into a cultural phenomenon and propelled the domestic box office to historic heights. Revenue for the July 21st through 23rd weekend was the fourth biggest of all time. In addition, it was the first time ever that one movie opened to 100 million or more and another 50 million or more. All right, now, before we get into all that, Tom, let me say this. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors being played here, and we need to unravel this because on this channel, we endeavor to explain entertainment. Here's what you should know. Yes, records were had, perhaps, in terms of money, but that's not saying that tons and tons of people showed up to the box office or to their theaters because, well, movie tickets are at a historic high. They have outstripped the rate of inflation. What that means is that you can have a very ho-hum level number of people go to the box office and you can still break records because, well, you're paying out the wazoo for those tickets. Now, I think that, there was plenty of people who went to go see Barbie and Oppenheimer, but this is not some kind of thing where it is shattering Titanic kind of attendance. I mean, we're nowhere even close to that. That's sort of hidden by the fact that these movie ticket prices are way up. Tom, I want to go to you, though, and ask you, did you foresee, and if so, how, that Mission Impossible would have this kind of sort of a lackluster outcome?
Well, there's a couple different levels to that. First of all, the movie had... I wouldn't say it bombed or anything like that up front. It did underperform, though, a little bit its opening weekend. And I'd seen...
Especially domestically.
Yeah, and I'd seen the trend with all these blockbusters coming out this summer, basically just failing or out-and-out bombing. Everything from Transformers, Fast X, you name it. Little Mermaid is another, example, too. Of course, that where they just haven't had legs. They haven't performed, and... frankly, I thought the audience was kind of sending a signal to Hollywood that they'd had enough.
But are you surprised that they've had enough of Tom Cruise after he made such great inroads with average, everyday Americans who don't traditionally go to the box office because, as you said, they're sick of it? But he did so well with Top Gun Maverick, I really anticipated more of a bump here. And even after that sort of less than perfect opening for that first weekend, I still thought this was going to have traditional leg outs. And Tom, let me ask you this: you're big time into the weeds when it comes to the movie industry. Tell us, did it matter all that much that Oppenheimer essentially took all the IMAX showings? Did that have a bigger effect than some of these media outlets are covering?
No, and I'm glad you asked me that, and I can tell you why, at least in my opinion, and what I read from the tea leaves, and that was I could see that Tom Cruise, although he may be considered one of the last movie stars and one of the few bankable stars out there, still he's not perfect. He still has had movies in the past, The Mummy being one in more recent history that we can think of that just flat out bombed, right? So he's not impervious. And then you also have the fact that I think the anomaly with Top Gun wasn't so much Tom Cruise as it was just the fact that it was a sequel to a 45-year-old film that was frankly one of the most iconic films of the 80s. Right? Like, I mean, you go up and type in the 80s right now, and I'm sure at least third or fourth picture down is going to be Tom Cruise giving the thumbs up with the American flag behind him from Top Gun.
Makes
And I mean,
sense.
that soundtrack was iconic. It was a very big deal when it came out. I mean, if you go by inflation, that movie, I believe, made $1 billion then. So the fact that Top Gun made that much money, the anomaly was more so that it was a really good sequel to a movie that wasn't a franchise that has had, well, to talk about Mission Impossible, 6 other sequels. So at this point, it was one of those movies that people who normally don't go to the movies, which would be that older demographic and that 55 plus demographic ish, or even 45 and up demographics in some cases, those guys showed up and women, right, to Top Gun. Here's the thing. All those men and women that were showing up for Top Gun last year, they're in theaters again this summer, but they're not seeing any of the movies we've mentioned so far.
Oh, I bet you're talking about the third place film, which is
Exactly. They're all going to see Sound of Freedom. So those folks that made Top Gun 2 such a huge hit and people were banking on showing up for Mission Impossible didn't go to Mission Impossible. They went to Sound of Freedom. So I knew Mission Impossible was probably not going to live up to the expectations way before Barbenheimer was even a factor. Now, Barbenheimer did better than I think anybody anticipated.
yes.
And the reason I say it like that, because I know some people are sick of hearing it, but look, I'll tell you right now, the only reason Oppenheimer made as much money as it did is because it rode that pink train.
But that's
Okay.
right, because the women went to see Barbie, and the men said, "No,
Not just
I'll go
that.
see Oppenheimer with my buddies while you go watch that."
I'm sure you're aware of, they actually had double bills for this all over. And those double
Tom,
bills
I had
were
somebody in my
very
comments
well.
say that they are going for their third time to watch the double feature. I can't imagine.
Exactly.
It's a lot of movie watching.
And with that brings more butts to the seats for Oppenheimer that normally wouldn't have gone otherwise. So, I mean, I think Oppenheimer would have performed initially the way they were projecting, but I think Barbie helped boost it by another 20, maybe even $30 million at the end of the day. Barbie is a phenomenon, and whether or not you like it or not, I'm not going to get into that part of it yet. The ad campaign that went into that film, the fact that there hasn't been a really strong female driven property in a long time, and going to the point, they keep trying to make boys properties into girls properties. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, if you actually made a girl property and did it right, or at least made it appear that you're trying to do something like that, put a lot of pink in it and whatnot, girls will show up, as they did for Barbie, and it was wall to wall pink at theaters this last weekend, as I'm sure you probably witnessed yourself if you happen to get out to one.
Absolutely. Tom, let me give you a theory I have on Mission Impossible 7 and critique it away. Let's see what you think of this. My thought was that as we were getting closer and closer to the movie's release, I became more and more enthusiastic that it was going to do well. The reason for that is because that the review scores were astounding. They were great. However, after I saw the film and gave my review of it, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. And I said that that concerned me because it needed to be a high 8, it needed to be a 9, it needed to be a 10 to do what Top Gun Maverick did. And that movie was a 9 or a 10. And so I think that it's no fault of Tom Cruise, but rather after I saw the film, I said, the pacing is poor. The bad guy's story is convoluted and kind of elementary. And then the CGI really came in and stole away the thunder from some of those practical effects and special stunts that Tom Cruise was participating in. and kind of made it look like it was fake anyway. And I just thought that was a real travesty for the movie. But do you think if it had been as good as Top Gun Maverick, that we'd be seeing a different effect and a different run out of it?
Well, I mean,
I've stumped Tom.
You got a thing here.
Internet first.
I mean, speaking on the movie's behalf, look, first of all, I guess because you asked a lot of things there, so I'm trying to collect.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those
critic factor. Here's the
answer.
thing: the things with the critics is outside of a few exceptions here lately, since they've realized I think the jig is up and they've got to, come up with a new game, and they can't give everything a triumph. It was the best since the last thing kind of scores anymore.
Right.
I've learned not to even just trust the critic scores no matter what they say anymore, because everything gets a standing ovation. Everything's better than the best thing there ever was.
Listen, Tom, anymore. Grace Randolph says that
vice versa.
Barbie is better than Citizen Kane. So
exactly. We've got a campaign out there now on the one hand that's trying to bring light to some of the things and problems in this film. And I'm not saying some people might be overreacting or not on one end, but they're definitely overreacting on the other by thinking this movie's in some way, shape, or form Oscar caliber quality, because even a lot of the people that like the film will flat out tell you it's got some issues and flaws. And there's clearly a growing number of people who feel like Barbie was misrepresented in the ads, because I did bring up the ad campaign it had.
All right, well, let's
that
talk
could be
about
a problem.
Let's talk about the advertising.
But I did want to answer your other thing real quick, though.
The other 12 questions I had.
Yeah, but the whole thing with Mission Impossible is, look, the critics may have liked it, but as you said, when you get into the film, at the end of the day, it's really, I compared the Mission, and I know I'm going to get some flack for this, but I did compare the Mission Impossible films to the Transformer franchise. And I don't mean in sense of like quality of storytelling so much as pretty much I can sit here and go, okay, tell me which Mission Impossible this is. Ethan's on a mission, something goes wrong, he gets double crossed, he's on his own, he gets his team together, they have to go do some elaborate scheme to prove their innocence. That's like every one of the Mission Impossible movies. It's no different than the Transformer movies where you go, look, Transformers have this magical thing. The bad guys get their hands on it. The Transformers got to get it back, or everything is going to be done with. The Transformers get it back, end of the day.
And Tiny Human somehow, by the fact they're a tiny human, has some ability to add some assist. No matter
I forgot the other important part, where it's always something in the past that we didn't realize was there already on Earth.
Yes, the hidden ancient MacGuffin.
So yes, I will admit Transformers much dumber to where Mission Impossible is safe, not so much dumb. Look, Tom knows by these films where he's flown, went one direction or the other, where people didn't quite like that. People like that a little bit more, but they didn't like this. So as you get through these movies, by the time you get to 5 and 6, you can tell he's got the formula pretty well set. But what we have now is the 7th film. It's kind of stale. And we've seen all the stunts. We've seen all the stuff in the previews already. Most people know that this movie's not going to take long to come to video on demand. Most likely it might, because Paramount might want to try and hang it out there for a little bit. But they also know there's a second film coming. That's the other thing. The biggest gripe people had with the Spider-Verse movie is that a lot of people didn't know going into that there was another movie coming afterwards.
Well, the cliffhanger ending where you don't get any kind of resolution is tough.
And people hate that. Hollywood may think they like that. They're fine with that on a TV show, but people dislike that in a movie. But anyway, Pro, you were going to say another question.
Just in all fairness, we need to say, we're here to report the news and analyze entertainment in the most honest way possible. We have hounded Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny. We have hounded Flash. We have mocked Elemental and all of these other movies which have lost money. Now, we're not talking about anything along the same scale as those films. But in all honesty, unless Mission Impossible has a significant comeback in the third weekend, folks, it's going to lose money. And we'll talk about it. We'll tell the truth about that. We're not here to play favorites, even though it would be nice for that franchise to do well. It's not looking good. Nothing catastrophic, but might not break even at this point. Now, Tom, I want to go to you, though, about Barbie in particular. You, yesterday, when I was on Midnight's Edge with you, you said something that intrigued me. And so I want to follow up on that as we sort of wrap up this conversation. But I mentioned that with Barbie, we're all kind of waiting to see, is Go Woke, Go Broke dead? And not dead in the sense of general audiences, but dead in the sense that there may be the opportunity to reach out to 35 and under women, okay, millennials and Gen Z women, and they may really like to a fervor this woke content and this third wave, fourth wave, 12th wave feminist kind of material. You said that, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You said something that indicated to me that you had never perhaps thought that go woke, go broke is a hard set rule. Can you describe to me what your thoughts really are on this?
Um, well, in this case, I guess I would consider this an exception just because of the, and I don't remember exactly which part you're referring to that I said yesterday, so I'll try to remember some of what I said. But in this case, I think it was the fact that people were, first of all, they were duped by the trailers and the advertising material into seeing a movie that they didn't necessarily know what it was at first. But once they got it, there's a large portion of people that were so happy with what they got that they're overlooking a lot of the subtext and the really obvious stuff that's on the level. Some people aren't, right? I will give credit where credit's due, like people like Nina Infinity and some other critics in our circles are like, I acknowledge that it has problems. I acknowledge that there's woke elements in here. I acknowledge that there's, some questionable bits here and there, but overall she enjoys it. So she acknowledges that, but she also acknowledges that she enjoys it. And I'm fine with that. My problem is there's like this cognitive dissonance with it that I think this is what you're talking about, where I compared it to, it'd be like if, a bunch of us guys like Andre and I, who are huge He-Man fans, for instance, after Revelations, we were like, look, we get it. Tila is now the boss, the girl boss. She's in control. They killed He-Man. In fact, they brought him back so they could kill him twice, but we don't care because it looks like the toys. Right. And I get it. For guys, that's a little easier to push aside because you're right. Girls have not in the last few years gotten a lot of entertainment specifically made for them. And it's a crime. I've said it before. Wonder Woman, we should be on the third, fourth movie by now. In fact, we should have had 3 or 4 Wonder Women by now. Same thing with Barbie. We should have had at least 1 or 2 Barbie movies before this, right? So the fact that we're just finally getting these things is a crime in and of itself. But I believe the bigger crime here, especially with Wonder Woman or with Barbie compared to something like Wonder Woman, is Barbie clearly has an agenda. And there's a lot of people who are trying to say it's satire, it's this, it's that, or the other. It's like, look, I'd like to believe you, but as much as I respect certain people's opinions on that, I don't see it in the movie. It's not in the resolution, and it sure as heck ain't with the people who made the movie. Because if all you got to do is go out there and research Greta Gerwig just a little bit to figure out where she lands as far as her opinions.
Right. We need to call out Miss Andrew. It is what it is. I've put this to a very simple test. This is not complicated. I've asked the people who love the film, and I'm not taking that from them. Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to enjoy whatever material you want. But I've asked the people who've enjoyed it, is there a single male character in any part of the movie who is a positive sort of model, And their response is, well, there's 2 guys who are kind of sympathetic. And I'm like, oh, so there's 2 guys that you feel badly for.
One of which is the villain.
Yeah. Right. I said, well, yeah, I guess. And if you do that from the opposite side, right? If there's a film where there's not a single positive female character in the movie, well, I know what that is. So It seems to me that it goes the opposite direction as well.
Yeah, I mean, we made the point that I think several times over that if this was a movie, same kind of plot but reversed roles, you're right. Everybody would be losing their minds right now on how sexist it was and all that kind of stuff. But since it's being done this way, and and again, Greta Gerwig herself has never said once anything about this movie being satire or parody, right? It's people that are saying this, other critics and people who are trying to defend the film. And I challenge anybody to please show me an interview where she does, because Six, our wonderful mod and co-host and producer from time to time over there at Midnight's Edge, she did the footwork herself, and she went through each and every interview she could find and scoured the internet. And not once does she ever talk about that stuff. She said, oh, you can find plenty of stuff where she's saying it's a feminist this and it's a feminist that. And, all the other stuff that, like Kate McKinnon and all those other ones presented about the film. And that is there. And I think we talked about this morning. Like that, I think the strike was probably to the benefit of this film, because had these stars been allowed to continue their the advert
Apple.
campaign, then people would have figured it all out what this movie really was about, and maybe people would have went into it a little differently. Because the only thing I've said is, and I've never told anybody not to go see the movie. All I've been telling people is don't take your kids, right?
Right.
Because that's the number one thing I think the movie failed on, was telling parents that this is not a kids movie.
I think it'll go over the heads of 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds. I think the kids who
Maybe,
are
but here's the
most
thing.
at risk are like the 8, 9-year-olds.
Right, and I agree with you, because here's the thing: in the screening I saw, it was made up of a pretty diverse audience, but there was a lot of kids there.
Right, because
And
it's Barbie.
behind,
It's a toy made
yeah,
for kids.
and I mean, I'll try to be as, yeah, I'm going to be forward here a little bit. So if there's anybody listening that has children, you might want to take them out of the room for a little bit, or listen to this when they're not around. But so you don't have to necessarily bleep anything, because it's not really swear words, but this is what's in the movie. I mean, when she talks about, not having a vagina to the construction workers, a teenager who was watching the film and a group of teenagers behind me said, "Isn't this a kids movie?"
Right. Well, no, it's not. And by the way,
And
Tom,
and then it
we've
gets
got the
worse.
thing out of we've got the thing out of Mattel just breaking yesterday, where they're going to bring movies such as Barney, and this is insane to me, but they're going to bring Barney out, and Barney is not going to be a kids movie.
Yeah, we
It's going to
reported
be
on that
aimed at
last
adults.
week.
It's the
Yeah.
strangest, weirdest thing ever. So
I think it's
who
going to be
knows
very
how this is going to
similar to
go?
this Barbie movie, and it's going to be like adults that grew up with Barney and them dealing with something and having Barney help them in their, getting into adulthood. But the other point I was going to make is, at the end of the movie, the big joke at the end, not to spoil anything for anybody, but for those who have seen it, you kind of already know. But basically, Barbie shows up to a doctor's appointment for a specific body part that we just mentioned. And let's just say that all the kids in the audience, at least 3 or 4 of them that I could hear audibly, said, "What is that?"
Well, what a way
And that's just
to
two. That's just
yeah,
2 points, right?
what a way to
There's
introduce
several.
that concept to kids. It's
Yeah.
gonna be a
So, like,
fun car
again,
ride
and
home.
that's not what this discussion is about. At the end of the day, though, here's my other part of what you asked me, and this is what I'm upset about most, is that in that cognitive dissonance and in all these people going to see this movie, you just mentioned that, we're getting a Barney movie, we're getting an Uno movie, we're getting probably getting a Slinky movie. Who knows? They're going right back to it just after after Transformers hit big. Anything that's a toy, a game, they're going to try and make it into a movie now because this is a success. So they're already learning the wrong lesson there. And the second lesson I'm afraid that they're going to learn here, and you were kind of alluding to, is that, oh, maybe you don't go broke if you go woke. Because this is the thing, is we have, as an audience, seemed to come together collectively and said, guess what? We've had enough. Whether it's the woke stuff or just the over-bloated BS, the crap McDonaldization of movies, we have had enough. And
So you
people
think we
just
might
weren't
get
showing up.
radicalized Clueless and radicalized Legally Blonde
Oh,
reboots?
I'm sure. Maybe not. I don't know about. Well, I think there is a third Legally Blonde movie coming out, but yeah, I wouldn't. I think Clue is already one that's already been talking about, Clue the game, but Clueless, I don't know. But I don't think they're going to go that direction. My point is I think they're going to see that just because you go woke doesn't necessarily mean you go broke. I hope that, like, some people have posited, and you may have even brought this up to a point where maybe they'll say, oh, if we maybe actually just make girl properties for girls and boy properties for boys, we'll be okay. But I think you can also agree with me that we shouldn't hold our breath in thinking that we're going to get a Masters of the Universe movie that's uber, male centric at all. Right? It's
Or a
definitely going to
Teenage
be,
Mutant Ninja Turtles movie
or
where
for that matter, yeah.
right, where April looks like April and the turtles are actually
Yeah.
cool. So
So in that sense, like, I think Hollywood's going to learn the wrong lessons. They're going to see this as, oh, this is proof that going woke does not make you go broke. The only way I don't see them saying that directly out there is because they'd actually have to admit that this is woke, and that would lose a portion of their audience, and they might get smart on that. But I don't know. I think that all the progress we made this year by movies like Mission Impossible bombing pretty much, or failing, like we just talked about, all the other big movies like Flash and Little Mermaid and everything else this year bombing, because and I know the only 2 movies that have really made any money this year have been like Mario Brothers and Guardians of the Galaxy, outside of a few horror films, really.
Sound of Freedom, though.
Sound of Freedom is the exception, and that's what I was going to get to. Because,
Sorry, I
like,
apologize.
no, that's fine, because Sound
We're on
of
the same
Freedom
page.
is the outlier here, because that's the movie people were actually going to see until Barbie and Oppenheimer. Right. And Oppenheimer isn't really the non-subject here. It's Barbie is the problem. And I'm not trying to
and
be,
this second weekend for both will be very interesting.
absolutely. But sadly, Barbie has not been losing any steam going into this week.
It's been phenomenal Monday, phenomenal Tuesday, and we'll see If that continues, though, here's what's interesting, Tom. If that continues, then it has to be coming largely from a very narrow demographic, right? Because it's something like 80% of the audience for Barbie has been 35 and under, which that's insane.
That's
And
the other thing.
then
Yep.
high 60% women. You would imagine now that the general audiences know, oh, this is a smashing of the patriarchy, that will go even farther into the female ratio. So you're going to have to carry, this movie will have to be carried on the shoulders of under 35 women. That is a very niche demographic, right? Because guys don't want to go see it. So it's got to be carried completely by that group. We'll see how it goes. But
well, that's an interesting point, because you're right. Like, it's kind of a flip demographic of what we're used to.
yeah.
But at the same time, the 35-year-old demographic and under used to be the main movie-going audience. And that's a point like Paul Chatto has made, is that, millennials and Zoomers don't really go to movies anymore. I mean, of course, there's the exception, but for the most part, as a generational thing, it's not part of their pastime. They'd rather go play a video game or wait for it to come to streaming than actually go out to see a movie, to where those are the kids that normally they would be making these MCU movies for and all this other stuff that haven't been going to them. They're coming to this Barbie movie, right? Kind of like with Sound of Freedom, to where there was a movie there for a demographic that's normally not represented. And beyond age, I mean, people are not even bringing up that Sound of Freedom is bringing in like a major Hispanic demographic.
Great point.
And all that other kind of stuff, to where it's finally getting picked up in other countries now, which
Hollywood hates it, by the way.
Oh, and they're mad. They're livid about this.
Yep.
This is one of the worst things that ever. But until Barbie, that's why it mattered. Now that Barbie happened,
if it was all white people going to Sound of Freedom, Hollywood would have the ability to attack it. They can't attack it because it's being supported by Latinos.
Well, and they were already attacking the Latinos in that, because it was already, not to get too deep in the weeds here, but like it was already set up earlier in the year, this whole idea that, oh, they're already, they're technically white people, so they're just practicing another form of white supremacy. I'm sure you remember that whole joke we kept poking fun with Mikey with. But, he just showing how absurd it is. And it's like, you're right. You're 100% right. But at this point, Barbie and Oppenheimer are something they can use to diffuse Sound of Freedom a little bit.
I like it.
And that's kind of where I'm scared. And that's where people are like, oh, you're overreacting. No, I'm like, am I really overreacting though here? Because all the progress that we have made in the last year, basically, destroying the bad movies and showing them that we will go to see things like Mario and the rare exceptions that we have, is Barbie gonna send the wrong message? Now that's what I'm afraid of. And we're already seeing, like I just said, not to repeat myself, but we're getting, a freaking Uno movie, man. I mean,
well, they did that because the sequel is easy to name, but
Deuce. But
that's right.
And it's gonna be a Deuce.
Well, and so I take it you have the same feeling of Barbie. Folks, we're going to be watching Barbie to see how it does in its second and third weekends. Mattel, we've leaked this out according to a source that we have inside the toy industry who has given us major leaks in the past. They've all been correct. This person's phenomenal. Thank you, by the way, if you're listening. Mattel wants $850 million out of this film. That's what we're watching to see if it can get. If it can break 700, then I think Tom is right that this is going to be a harbinger for many, many, many more films of this variety. If, though, it kind of dissipates over time, over the next 2 and 3 weeks, then we'll have to reassess what's going on here. But for today, we have to stop by saying that Barbie right now has defeated Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Not something I thought would happen. I thought Barbie would do well. But Tom, you nailed it. And Tom, where can people find you on this great, big, beautiful web?
Of course, you can find me at Midnight's Edge and Midnight's Edge After Dark. And we'll have to see how this plays out, because Andre and I have been only a couple of few people in our sphere so far who've said that Barbie has the potential to hit $1 billion. And if that happens, then we're kind of back to where I was square one again, like I was saying. So
Yep, Barbie at $1 billion will unleash the Captain Marvel kind of thinking. But we'll see what happens. Tom, you and Andre are an inseparable and fantastic duo over at Midnight's Edge. I highly recommend, folks, that you go check out the content over there. Subscribe to Midnight's Edge. So many of our other channels sit upon the shoulders of that giant, leading the way for all the rest of us. Folks, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe. And when you click it, you stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell. If you are watching this video at the time of release, well, folks, it's almost time for Eric July to return and share with us the Pro Show Live. Of course, that show is Thursdays, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time each and every week. The Rippaverse folks are with us this time. You do not want to miss it. And wherever you are, whatever you're doing, as we always say, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Make sure to catch the Pro Show Thursdays 5 to 7 Eastern Time. Entertainment Explained, The Culture Curve Conquered, live with Pro and all his friends.